Welcome to NSTA Web Seminars, where you can find live, interactive learning at your desktop. Today's seminar is called Teaching NGSS in Elementary School, with a focus on the 4th grade. Our presenters today are Ted Willard, Mary Starr, Kathy Renfrew, and Tracy Lavallee, with also support from Carla Zembel-Sol, who is unable to join us tonight. My name is Christina Crawley. I'm going to be moderating today's program, and Jeff Lehman is online with us to provide technical support. Now, before we get going with our web seminar, I'd like to remind you to visit the NSTA Learning Center, where you can find professional learning and over 11,900 resources for science educators. You'll find that over 4,200 of those resources are free, and you're welcome to add those to your library and access them when it's convenient for you. You can organize your resources by bundling them into collections or accessing thousands of other collections that have been made by NSTA and other teachers. Feel free to join the conversation in the community forum, where you can discuss content and classroom issues with other teachers. Our online advisors are available to help you find the information you're looking for, and you're welcome to use our free tools to help you organize your own professional development and meet your goals. It's all available at learningcenter.nsta.org. Now, I'd like to introduce today's presenters. We have Ted Willard joining us here from NSTA. He's the director of NGSS at NSTA. Carla, as I mentioned, isn't here with us, but she was very much involved in tonight's preparation, so you'll see her in content, if not in person. We've got Mary Starr joining us here from the Michigan Mathematics and Science Centers Network. Kathy Renfrew, who is an NGSS curator in Vermont. And we also have, along with us, Tracy Lavallee, who is a teacher who we've got a video for as well, and she's also going to be participating in tonight's seminar. So with that, I'm going to pass the baton over to our presenters and let them take it from here.
Thanks very much, Christina. Welcome, everyone. Glad to have you here. I'm going to give you just a little quick introduction to the standards. For some of you who have maybe on that line of having seen most of our web seminars this summer, it's a little repetitive, but we've got more than about 2/3 of us, I think, are new, so I'll give you a little bit to hang on to. NGSS, the Next Generation Science Standards, were developed by a group of 4 organizations: the National Academy of Sciences, a group called Achieve, the American Association for the Advancement of Science, and then, I'm sure my favorite and your favorite, the NSTA. And the process for making NGSS involved 2 steps. First, the development of a framework for K-12 science education, and then the standards themselves. And those standards are designed to sort of help drive curriculum, instruction, assessments, pre-service education, and professional learning. And all those, it touches upon all of those different elements. So we'll start off with the framework that was developed back in 2011, was released. And I hope you've had a chance to look at the framework. If you haven't, there's really no excuse. You can get a free PDF from the National Academies Press, or you can get a hard copy from NSTA Press at the Science Store. But the big headline here in the framework are the 3 dimensions that make up science education. It's the science and engineering practices, cross-cutting concepts, and disciplinary core ideas. We're going to touch a bit on all of those this evening. Now, the practices are the things that scientists do to understand the world around us, the things we want our students to do in the classroom as they learn more about the world. And so it's things like asking questions, planning out investigations, constructing explanations, engaging in argument. You know, again, the things that we do in the classroom, the things our students do in the classroom. Cross-cutting concepts are topics like patterns, scale, system, structure, and function that are not unique to any one discipline in the sciences, but are really cut across, hence the name cross-cutting, all the disciplines. And then we have the disciplinary core ideas themselves, so life science, physical science, earth and space science. And in NGSS, engineering and technology takes up place alongside the traditional science disciplines. And each of those disciplines break down into some further detail, as you can see here, and even into some further details, as can be seen on this page. And so that whole structure of those three dimensions was developed in the framework, which leads us on to the standards themselves. Now, the standards were developed by a group of 26 lead states, the states that are outlined in blue. Each of those states had a group of educators who was involved in having teams that reviewed the standards. And there was also a group of 41 writers stretched across the country. Some were classroom teachers. In fact, almost half were classroom teachers at the time that things got started. But there were also university faculty, some scientists, people who were district personnel and state personnel, lots of different roles. And at this stage in time, we have now, this map shows you the states that have adopted NGSS state. And so that works out to be about 3 in 10 students that live in states that have adopted NGSS. So that's the sort of state of the standards. Let's take a closer look at one of the standards and look at it. You have a piece up here, a performance expectation. And this is describing what we are trying to assess. So in this one here, construct an argument that plants and animals have internal and external structures that function to support survival, growth, behavior, and reproduction. So this is what a student would be expected to be able to do at the end of the 4th grade. And this is what they would be expected to have mastered. In doing so, students are going to be able to show their ability with the practices, the core ideas, and the cross-cutting concepts. And I'll further explain that. But I want to make sure that everyone understands that that performance expectation is what is to be assessed. It's not telling the teacher, this is what you have to do with your students in your classroom. You still have just as much freedom as ever, as long as you can get your students in a place where they're capable of constructing an argument as described here. But when they can do that, this idea of constructing an argument is a science and engineering practice. Here, construct an argument with evidence, data, and/or a model. Then we have this idea that plants and animals have internal and external structures that function to support survival, growth, behavior, and reproduction. And you can see right here that same information. So students being able to do this would show that they had gained an understanding of this disciplinary core idea. And then finally, the cross-cutting concept, that a system can be described in terms of its components and their interactions. So here we have the internal and external structures that function to support, etc., etc. So this one performance expectation provides opportunities to really get a sense of all 3 dimensions and pulls them together. So with that little brief introduction there, I'm going to pass things on to Mary and Kathy and Tracy to give you a little bit more information about NGSS in fourth grade. Here you go.
Okay, thanks, Ted. Go ahead, Kathy.
I was just going to welcome everybody. Welcome to you, Mary. It's good to see you again. And I'm so excited that all of these people are here. And tonight, as Christina has said, and that we have Mary Starr from Michigan, myself from Vermont, along with Tracy, and Carla, who's here with us in spirit, as we know. And I'm going to let each of them tell them a little bit more about themselves. So we'll start with you, Mary.
All right. Sorry about that, Kathy. I jumped the gun. My name is Mary Starr, and I'm lucky enough to be the Executive Director of the Michigan Mathematics and Science Centers Network. And the network is 33 different centers throughout the state. And we provide a lot of the professional development experiences and opportunities for Michigan science and mathematics teachers. So welcome to everyone tonight, and I'm really glad that you were able to make it and excited that we have so many people who have come now to more than one of these webinars. So thank you very much, and I'll turn it back to Kathy and Tracy.
Oh, too slow. too fast. So who am I? So I'm Kathy Renfrew, and I'm currently the K-5 Science Coordinator here at the Agency of Education of Vermont. As Christina mentioned, I'm a curator. My Twitter handle is @KRScienceLady, and as Mary talked about earlier, we hope to see you. And I'm also an online advisor, so I wear many, many hats. But I am loving this project. And I want to welcome our special guest here tonight, and Tracy is the very brave teacher who let me into her room and now is letting all of you into her classroom in just a few minutes. So I'm going to let her just talk about herself for just a minute or two.
Good evening, everybody. It's really a wonderful honor, and I'm very excited to be here tonight with all of you. As you can see on the slide, it gives you a little background information about me and my teaching experience, as well as some other experiences I've had in terms of science professional development and leadership. Science has been my passion for many years, and so when Kathy mentioned this idea of coming into my classroom, I jumped at it, believe it or not. It was a lot of work, but it was also a lot of fun, and we all enjoyed it, and we all learned from it. So I'm really glad you're here tonight, and I hope that you learn from it as well.
And at this point, we're going to hand it back over to Mary.
All right. So we have, in the past, at every webinar, we've taken some sort of a poll to just sort of get an idea of who's joining us. So Christina is the expert at poll facilitating. So Christina's going to take care of the poll and ask you and show you how to mark where you fall in this poll.
Okay, great. And some people have started already. Rather than the traditional poll where we use the buttons, the A, B, C, D, E, we're just going to stamp directly onto the whiteboard so that we can get a good sense of what you are doing. If for any reason you're having trouble and it's not working, you're not able to stamp directly, this can sometimes be an issue for mobile devices, then feel free to type that in the chat box just like Erin did. She mentioned she's a 4th grade teacher. You can do that. And also if you typed into other and you want to mention what that other might be, you're also welcome to put that in the chat box. So I'll give you, let's say, another 10 seconds or so to work on that, and then Mary, you're welcome to jump in and start commenting on that whenever you'd like.
It's a little amusing that there are so many people who identify as other, so we probably need to update our poll category to try to figure out what other means. So I'm seeing a lot of students, university students, student teachers, so informal science ed, so that's awesome. We really appreciate the variety of perspectives of the people who are coming to the webinars. So in light of that, we want to make sure that everyone is engaging in the webinar as really great participants, because you all have so much to add to the discussion here. So we're asking you to really participate, to use this chat window to share your ideas, to ask questions. There will be times where we actually specifically ask for questions, but in addition, you're welcome to just put your question in that chat box anytime. The beautiful thing about having a great team like this with Kathy and me and Tracy working together, as well as Ted still sort of lurking in the background there, is that there's always somebody available to participate in the chat box. And that's been a real positive for, I think, for these webinars. And then we really expect that everybody comes to this asking real questions that are interesting to them and are concerning for them. And we want to make sure that everybody recognizes that we're all here with positive intent. So we really are trying to do the best to improve our practice and to make sure that coming out of this webinar, we've moved forward into even more understanding of the next generation science standards. So this is what we're going to do today. We're going to really give everybody, hopefully, an overview of the Next Generation Science Standards in 4th grade. That's the goal. We're going to do that in several parts, really unpacking one performance expectation, thinking about several of the science and engineering practices, looking at video from Tracy's classroom and how she engages her students in thinking about this, the disciplinary core ideas in the physical science focus around energy. So as we work through this, whatever questions you have, put them in the chat, participate, and at the end of the webinar, we're going to ask you what you might take forward into your own classroom from what you learned tonight. So we'll actually have an action item. All right, so stepping into the big picture of Next Generation Science for 4th grade. In every grade in the elementary school, it's very clearly identified what the science expectations are. And in the 4th grade, there's 4. 2 physical science focus areas, and then a life science and an earth science. Today, we're going to really pick up on this idea about energy, and the video you'll see and the other resources that you'll see will be about energy. Additionally, when you're teaching 4th grade and Next Generation Science Standards, there will be physical science focus on waves, the life science structure, function, and information processing, and then earth science processes that shape the earth. So you might see that some of those are kind of familiar to you in their big ideas, and as you end up exploring the NGSS documents, you'll really identify what disciplinary core ideas, practices, and cross-cutting concepts are embedded within each one of those topic areas. But as I said, we're going to focus tonight on the disciplinary core idea around energy. So it's the physical science disciplinary core idea. In thinking about this, we might really look at some of the questions that 4th graders would be able to answer at the end of instruction. For example, what is energy and how is it related to motion? The one for tonight is how is energy transferred? All of this information that you're going to see is readily available, as Ted said about the framework. It's also in the framework, which is free in PDF form, and also in NGSS documents. So we're not creating too much here. We're really pulling forward the materials and all the resources that are already available to you, and just making sure that you're aware that these are available. So we're going to be focused today on the expectation that energy can be transferred from place to place. And some of the choices in 4th grade could be sound, light, heat, and then electric currents, or in the collision of objects. Tonight we're really going to focus on the electric current piece, and you'll be able to see how Tracy really developed the idea of energy transfer within the electric currents in the video and her description of her classroom work. So if you look at the disciplinary core idea around energy and the performance expectations for 4th grade, you would actually see that there's 4 individual performance expectations. We're going to focus on this one for grade 4, PS3-2, make observations to provide evidence that energy can be transferred from place to place by sound, light, heat, and electric currents. And again, we're going to focus only on the piece around electric current. So Ted mentioned at the beginning that there's 3 dimensions for science teaching in the Next Generation Science Standards: the disciplinary core idea, science engineering practices, and the cross-cutting concepts. So within the one performance expectation that we're using as the focus of tonight, I wanted to really pull out those 3 dimensions so that you could see how they're embedded within the each performance expectation. So we're going to start with the disciplinary core idea, because a lot of people want to think about what's the content. So I'd like to start with the disciplinary core idea. And in the PS3, or Physical Science 3-2, you would identify the disciplinary core idea as energy can be transferred from place to place by sound, light, heat, and electric currents, right? You would find more about that information, the unpacking of that disciplinary core idea in the foundation box. So on the NGSS page, you would find this colored foundation box, and that would really tell you what the disciplinary core idea that is within the performance expectation and really help you to understand what that means. I've pasted the information about energy under, at the bottom of the slide here, but that came directly from that foundation box. Just as part of the, information, you'll know which of the disciplinary core ideas relate to a performance expectation because they're coded. So there's these little tiny codes at the end of each of the elements or the bullets that tell you which of the performance expectations the element refers. All right. So another dimension is the science and engineering practices. So as Ted said, these are like the scientist's tools. So it's the toolbox that scientists would use to really understand phenomenon and the disciplinary core, which is the disciplinary core idea. In this case, in our performance expectation, the science and engineering practices make observations to provide evidence. Now, you probably are familiar now with the 8 science and engineering practices, and you're thinking, there's not one that's labeled make observations to provide evidence. So you have to dig a little bit farther on this performance expectation and really look at that element, the bulleted information in the foundation box, and you would see that make observations to produce data is an element within the planning and carrying out investigations science and engineering practice. So whenever you're, doubting where you're supposed to go next, that foundation box really provides you with a ton of extra information, as well as the framework from which the foundation box comes. And again, you'll notice that that code is at the end of the science and engineering practice description. Okay, so that's the science and engineering practices. So this is our awesome graphic for science and engineering practices, and I like the swirl because it reminds me that these practices, while they're numbered, they're not intended to be used in a particular order. So for our sake today, from the performance expectation, we've got planning and carrying out investigations. That's the practice that's identified in the performance expectation. But I think if you watch, you'll see the students in Tracy's class will engage in these other 3 science and engineering practices also. So keep your eye out as you're listening to Tracy's description of her classroom and also watching that video. And then finally, in the performance expectation, the last dimension will describe the 3rd dimension is a cross-cutting concept. So beautifully enough, energy is a cross-cutting concept. So you could imagine, think about energy in our case is really about the transfer of energy from place to place. And in our situation, or our description tonight, it's going to be around electric circuits. But you could also think about other ways that you think about energy transfer in physical and earth science and life science. So these cross-cutting concepts are really those ideas that move across all 3 disciplines of science, and they're critical for helping kids to really understand how science works and what those big ideas that are common in all the sciences are. So in our case tonight, the cross-cutting concept would be about energy and the transfer of energy. All right, Kathy and Christina, I'm going to turn it back over to you.
Okay, so just before we do this, I wanted to say that as you're going to notice in the video, Tracy and I decided to focus on electric current as our way of demonstrating this cross-cutting concept. But before we go on, we would like you to share what your experiences are with working with electricity and electric current and energy. So please respond. Christina, maybe you can add a little bit more.
Sure. Okay, so for the poll, we are going to be using the poll button. So if you're looking at your name at the top of the participants window, you've got 4 buttons underneath. The far right, you see the letter A. If you click on that, you'll get the options A, B, C, D, E. Choose from that if you can, and then we'll be able to publish the results onto the whiteboard. If for some reason it's not working at all, then last resort, feel free to use the chat box. But if you can, try to use the poll button so that we can put your number in there and put it in for the final tally. So it looks like there's maybe a few more people putting in their answers. So I'll just wait a little bit longer, and then I'll publish it onto the whiteboard and let you take it from there, guys. Okay, so here we go.
So it looks like we have quite the variety in terms of what people have done previously working with electricity and electric currents. Seems like there's a fair number of people who have actually had students really do some duplication of electric circuits, but not necessarily build some themselves. So it'll be interesting for you to watch some of the video as we move on. And I'm going to turn this over to Tracy in just a second so that she can tell you a little bit more about the work we did together.
Good evening again. So when we began this, Kathy and I originally spent some time looking over a unit that had been written and by a number of people that she works with here at the state as well as at NSTA. And so we looked at a way to make it, number one, fit into the curriculum that I currently use in my school here in Vermont, as well as integrating some interdisciplinary ideas like ELA from the core, Common Core. So it was a big project, but we knew that we wanted to have this idea of an anchoring event to really engage the students. And so on the slide, you'll see that this is where we introduced the phenomenon that we went on to then explore. This was sort of our overarching question. Both those questions that you see next to the picture of the energy ball, how and why does the energy ball light up when you touch the sensors, and how does it demonstrate energy transfer? Those questions are threaded throughout our learning sequence and teaching sequence that we did. We wanted to engage the students in the content right away, right from the beginning. We wanted them to be interested and curious and excited. And we began by showing them the energy ball, which lights up and buzzes when you touch the 2 sensors. And then we posed these questions to them. And then you'll see on the next slide that we engaged students in the anchoring event. And it was a lot of fun. If any of you have played with energy balls before, they are a lot of fun, and there's other things that you can do with them. So here's a photo of how it was introduced and the questions we posed. You'll see in the video that I, later on, how I demonstrated the energy ball.
Okay. Before we go on, I just want to point out that if you look at this picture, it says, the bottom question on the slide says, how does the energy ball demonstrate energy ball? Well, I noticed that, and I decided that I wanted to intentionally leave it in because I wanted to point out just one more time that this is a real classroom with a real teacher who sometimes writes the wrong thing on the board and then it gets changed. But I really wanted to get that idea of that this is a real classroom. So with that, I'm going to go on, and Tracy's going to have it again. So
after we posed the question, the students were asked to go back to their seats and record individually in their science notebooks a drawing with pictures and words, a model of what they thought was happening inside the energy ball. After they finished working in their notebook, then they worked with partners and they developed a collaborative model of their initial thinking. They needed to come to an agreement as well when they were working as partners. It wasn't very easy as students were not always willing to give up their own ideas. And so part of our instruction included how do we talk to each other and respectfully disagree or negotiate, because it's not always easy.
So now we're getting closer to the video we've been telling you all about it, but I wanted to just set up the stage for the introduction. So again, the focusing or the driving question was, how does the energy ball, which lights up and buzzes, demonstrate energy transfer? I'm going to tell you a little bit about Tracy's classroom, and you can see most of it here, but where it's in Northwest Vermont, and there's some rural and some suburban. There were learning experiences that happened from before Christmas break, the holiday break, and after. So there was some lag time in the middle. So it was interesting trying to work with students. This video was edited down from many, many 50-minute sessions. Just as we start, I want to just say that we really need to have some respect for our colleagues who are willing to share their classrooms. So just think about that when we think about our comments as we discuss this, because it's really important for us to think about all of that. And with that, I have one more thing I want to talk to you about before we move to the video. And that is that within the videos, there's some talk moves. These talk moves come from Carla's book, What's Your Evidence? And I want you to be thinking about these talk moves and see which ones of them you might see in the video, and so we can talk about it after the video. And with that, I'm turning it back to Christina.
Okay, great. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to push this video to you all, and it's going to open up in a browser, and then you can watch it from there. I'm also going to put the link in the chat box so that you can save that for later or if you're having any issues. When you do come back in the room, I'm going to ask you to go to the poll button, which is now no longer an A, B, C, D, E, but it's a green check or a red X. So when you've finished watching the video, come back into the main Blackboard Collaborate space and give us a green check, and then from there we'll know to move on. Okay, so with that, I'm going to push the video and enjoy it. Okay, I think that I know that at least half the people are back in the room. If you are still watching the video, my apologies for speaking over you, but if you could just press stop or pause on the video for now and come back into the Blackboard Collaborate space, I think we're going to continue from here. But do keep that link, and the videos from tonight are included in the collection, so as long as you have the collection link, you're all set.
Hello, we're back. Tracy's going to talk for a minute now about some of the meetings that we had during this learning experiences, this group of learning experiences.
Well, I'm glad it seems like people enjoyed the video. Like I said, it was the very first video, and then pieces of the additional learning activities that we had afterwards regarding the making the models and the wisdom walk. During the course of this instructional sequence, there were numerous scientist meetings. Some of the ones included the gathering ideas, and part of the model making as well elicits that prior knowledge from students and beginning to get their ideas about what they think is happening. One of the scientist meetings that you didn't see was a gathering of ideas, was after they drew their models and they came back and shared them with the entire group and initiated as a way to get that initial understanding. This was, I like to think of it as my first formative assessment of what the students are thinking and what their ideas are at the very beginning. And the great thing about the models is it does allow for room for kids to go back and revise later.
And just to point out a couple more things that Tracy talked about. So as you look at this slide, think about the reasons why we do it, and provoke curiosity just jumps right out at me. And really thinking about what happens in a gathering ideas meeting, and the fact that we're really trying to ask some open-ended questions. We're trying to see and get our first clear view into what those students are thinking. But again, it is focused. It was focused around the energy ball. It's not just a sharing at this point. There's a purpose. So I'm going to move us along again. And at this point, I want you to think about how Tracy used some of the top moves to scaffold the experience of developing a model. And so that's the big question that I'm asking for you to respond to in the chat right now. But also, any other questions you have at this point. We've given you a lot of information, and we've done a lot of talking at you right now. So I'd really like to hear from you at this point. So please respond in the chat, and maybe Christina and Ted can help us, and we'll try to respond to those questions.
Great. So, Kathy, I don't think have any questions that have been put here in place. We have a due request to see the list of talk moves. I don't know if you want to say any more specifically about them, either Mary or Kathy. And then we've got a question from Polly here as well. It's a long question, so I'm just taking it in here for a second. It's an interest in resources and finding resources. I don't know, Kathy or Mary, do you want to take a back at that?
Could you repeat the question, Ted?
Absolutely. They're interested in knowing if any good resources address the developmental readiness for the practice standards of students at each grade level. And that is a primary piece. There's another question here about how is the NGSS organized, and I'll answer that very quickly. Just to note that in grades K through 5, NGSS is organized grade by grade, so there are specific 3rd grade standards, 4th grade standards, 5th grade standards. But in middle school and high school, they're in bands, and so there are standards that states or districts can make a choice of what's taught in 6th, 7th, or 8th grade, and choices they can make about what's taught at different grades in high school. But back to Kathy or Mary about the idea about resources for teaching.
Well, at the end of this webinar, I've definitely given some ideas for the set of resources for teaching some of these things. The other thing is in the collection, I have put lots of resources. What I would like to do with this particular question is wait until we get to the end and see if this particular question is answered by those resources, or if I need to dig a little deeper.
That makes great sense.
Can I jump in for a second?
Please go right ahead, Mary.
So this is Mary, and Carla's not here tonight, and I have nothing that I gain out of this, but I have to tell you, you ought to buy the Talk News, the What's Your Evidence book, because the description and the videos that are in that book about how to use those talk moves and what it looks like in classrooms changes what you do. And so I'm going to plug Carla's book as a huge and very, very valuable resource.
And I want to say ditto to that. Ditto, ditto, ditto. It's very readable. Teachers, I've used it with loads of teachers. They love the book, and they find it valuable for their everyday teaching. So, again, ditto. And now, as we think about these talk moves, here's the chart, again, of talk moves. My question to you is, which ones or any of these did you actually notice while you were watching the video? And I'm practicing some wait time here. Okay, well, I think that I'll help you with that. So, you might have a clue by looking at this slide. But now, here you can see that one of the top moves that was definitely employed was the proposing of draft claims, that those children were making draft claims when they were recording their initial ideas and developing the model. So that's very important to us, and that definitely did happen. Another one that happened was considering alternatives, that when students went on the wisdom walk, they were actually considering different alternatives, noticing the similarities and the differences. And the use of the wisdom walk is powerful in many ways. And I know I noticed some people talking about how it could be used in writing and math and social studies, and absolutely. And I think it's one way to encourage them to consider and think about other ideas. And sometimes they notice the similarities and differences, but especially in looking at the differences, sometimes it helps them do some revision, and then some deeper discussions begin to happen as well.
Great. We had another specific question, I think really sort of for Tracy here, about what did you mean by a draft claim in the process that you used? And some other people had noted that they wondered whether the term first models or claims rather than draft models claims might make more sense. And so you might want to respond to that, Tracy.
It definitely is a language piece. We called it their initial or their first models, their first ideas. And, as a talk move, it's listed as a draft claim. So we use the word claims as well as evidence, but I don't believe we used in this particular instance the word draft. So again, if you look at what's written in the blue, it's recording their initial ideas, their initial claims. And I think that the draft idea is a way for teachers to sort of think about it, that it is a draft, like a first draft when you write, and it is going to change and revise over time. Hopefully that helps.
Yeah, I think that does. And then one more question that I saw posted up here is, after the students did the wisdom walk and spoke about their initial ideas, what came next?
After the wisdom walk?
Yes.
We're going to move into that right now.
Great. So, well, let's do that.
So you saw how we got started, and now we first began by introducing the phenomenon, which you saw in the first video, and now we begin to have the students dig a little bit deeper by investigating some of the concepts of energy transfer. And again, you know, sticking with the idea of electricity being the way that it's transferred. And we had a variety of different investigations that the kids did. So you'll see bits and pieces of some of those in the next video. But helping the kids begin to uncover and discover those disciplinary core ideas. And then having questions that we used specifically to really elicit and engage students in the investigation, as well as being able to scaffold for those students as they worked through those investigations.
And now it's time to start that video.
Okay, great. So we are going to push the video again, and same rules as before. When you do come back into the room, give us a green check so that we know when we can start again. So I'll go ahead and push that, and I hope you enjoy the movie. Okay, everyone, we have more than half of the participants back and maybe a few more as well. Give us a green check if you are back in the room. My apologies to those of you who are still watching the video. If you could put it on pause, save that link for later. There's a few of you who have mentioned that you weren't able to open the link. It could be related to a firewall at your school. Do keep that link later so that you can check it out and have a chance to look at those videos. Again, the links are in the chat box here, but you'll also have them available in the collection afterwards. So with that, I'm going to let our presenters carry on.
Hi, I'm back again, and I hope you enjoyed the video. And I guess one more time I want to apologize for those of you who are having difficulty. But we did the best. We've done the best we could because we really do want you to see into these classrooms, and the videos are the only ways for us to do that. So, thinking about the video, one of the things that I think is really important to me, actually, before I talk about what some of these that are on this list, what are some of the things that you saw or questions you have really quickly that we might answer as we're just having this brief conversation about this?
There's a lot of questions that I'm seeing, some of them about the wires being hot. The initial materials we used in the first exploration was copper wire, battery, and bulb. And obviously copper does get a little bit warm when it's placed on the D cell, but it never gets too warm, and it's a very slow process. What you didn't see were investigations that came later where students were given alligator clips and the bulb holders as well as battery holders. So we introduced slowly more materials, obviously with safety in mind. But the copper wire is a great way to have it happen so that they don't need all those other things, and they can easily figure out how to make a circuit, an initial circuit. So safety obviously is important. Some people also asked about expectations for science notebooks, and I've used science notebooks for years, and I keep it pretty simple. Obviously the date, I usually have the students write the question. If it's a question that I'm giving them for a guided inquiry, and if it's an investigation that they're doing where it's their own question, they would obviously write that. Observations, I call them scientific sketches that are labeled, explanations, claims, evidence, things like that. Sometimes we may have a T-chart or some other way to organize data depending on what the investigation is.
But Tracy, is there any specific format that you follow?
No, I don't follow a specific format. It's not like a lab report. I like to think of science notebooks as a journal for kids to write about their learning, their discoveries. And I think in the beginning of the year, I always talk about how scientists truly use notebooks. And sometimes they draw pictures, sometimes they write words. It really is a personal thing, but there are obviously certain things that need to be included.
Okay, and with that, I just want to bring up a couple of things that I think are really important for us to take note of in this video. And one of them is that if you think back to the PE, which said make observations to provide evidence that energy was transferred, there were lots of additional practices that have been used. And this the students asking questions, especially in the beginning of the second video. Another thing that was highlighted that I think is so important was the idea of building on the ideas of others. Tracy did an excellent job in encouraging the use of evidence and arguing from evidence, and really focused on the energy transfer. I know that as a classroom teacher myself, that sometimes you could get lost in the weeds pretty easily, but I think Tracy did a wonderful job in terms of keeping all of the learning experiences that those students went through and are still going through. That's the other piece we'll talk a little bit more about later, but this is far from the whole thing, so that's really important.
I agree, because what you saw was the beginning idea of developing a circuit. And, you know, obviously we couldn't film everything. We'd be here all night watching video, but trying to highlight some of the key talk moves, evidence, the practices, really getting at some of those. And, you know, students came back, they were given the additional materials, they were given challenges on how to light more than one bulb. We began to get into the idea of series versus parallel circuits. So there was a lot more sort of happening, and like Kathy said, still happening. We had a number of snow days that sort of forced us back too. So we're finishing up the unit now, and we obviously couldn't, you know, get everything on video. So hopefully, you know, by asking questions and seeing some of the storylines that we'll get into later, you'll see some of the other things that we did. One more last thing that I did want to, it was a question that somebody had about the energy in the battery. Students, you know, obviously we don't get into chemical energy at this grade level, and students are kind of in that place where they've seen batteries, they've used batteries. They just have this sort of assumption that there is some kind of energy in there, and kids will be quick to say, you know, you never want to cut one open, they're dangerous. And we talk about that as well. But yes, that it's a source of energy. And we talk about other sources of energy as well, such as the sun, that we can make those connections as well.
Okay, and with that, I'm going to move on. So one of the things you saw as part of this last video was another type of scientist meeting. And one of the things you saw was that students at this point were beginning to try to make meaning of what was going on. How is that energy ball really working? How is the energy ball similar to the battery and bulb? One of the things that I think is really important to, again, is that there are different types of scientist meeting. The one that we had in the beginning, we were really gathering, excuse me, initial ideas, and we were really open-ended and accepting of what students' responses are. At this point, again, we're not sharing, but we're really trying to construct claims and evidence, really getting at what is going on with those phenomena. And as you see in the pictures, these are some examples of what happened with some of the students. And Tracy's going to talk a little bit more about scientist meeting, this making meaning.
So making meaning is a little bit different from the gathering ideas, obviously. It's really where we begin to start to, after our investigations, really make some claims based on the evidence that we have observed ourselves, that we've written about, that we've talked about. In the picture that you see there, two of my students are doing a turn and talk. I always find that that's a great way for them to also, everybody have a chance to give voice to their ideas if they don't necessarily get to share while we're doing the scientist meeting. They can turn and talk to each other and share their ideas. It also is a time sometimes to give some direct instruction because, you know, while it's good to have a constructivist-based model that we use when we're teaching and helping students to develop their ideas through investigation. We also know that there's at times direct instruction is needed. Also, I often do demonstrations with them or have students demonstrate as they're constructing their understanding and sharing their understanding. It's also a good time to start to resolve misconceptions. And again, that idea of turning and talking, kids start to question each other as well and sometimes debate the ideas that they're having and encourage each other to, again, say, why do you think that? And what can you show me that proves that is correct?
Okay. Tracy's got one more.
I've got one more thing to say because I just was remembering this. In fact, it was interesting. We had our storyline that we did for this learning sequence. We had to go back based on some misconceptions that came up during this making meaning, scientist meetings. It's kind of a tongue twister, and we actually had to revise our learning sequence and get the kids to go back to some of the ideas, their initial ideas about circuits, because they started to get confused about some things that might be happening in the energy ball. So that was when we added some more investigations into parallel and series circuits.
Okay. And with that, I am going to move on. So Mary shared this slide earlier, and I just want to bring it back up just one more time because, again, just for you to think about all the additional practices that are being used in this instruction. So at the end of the video, two students were really asked to construct an explanation of what they knew at this point. Again, I want to bring up that for us during this instruction, this was still formative. Even though they're beginning to construct explanations of what was happening and what was happening with that energy ball and how it's working, this isn't the end of the learning experiences that the students are going through. So again, while we're looking again at what they're doing and what they're thinking, it's still formative at this place. And students in Tracy's classroom did an amazing amount of arguing with evidence. I was in that classroom for hours and hours, some of it videoing, some of it just talking. These particular two students in this picture were just amazing at being able to negotiate with each other and figure out where they were going.
And being respectful as well. And it was in this where they were doing some revisions of the model based on what they had learned so far, that we recognized some of the misconceptions that were still there and had to go a little bit deeper with some other ideas.
So we're going to switch gears a little bit now, and we're going to talk to you about the storyline. And when I'm talking about a storyline, I'm talking about the coherent plan we had in terms of putting all of these pieces together. And there was a lot of planning and talking that goes into this. So in the first slide here, this is where we started. You know, how does the energy ball demonstrate transfer? Did I miss this slide? Excuse me, sorry. Nope, okay. So the first slide here actually doesn't say what I thought it said, but you can see what we did as we thought about it. We said, okay, so this is our question. This is the claim that we want our students to get to. This is the evidence we want. And we wanted them to come to some reasoning and things. So Tracy can talk a little bit about the learning experiences really quickly in this particular part of the storyline.
Right, we talked about the beginning experiences where we had students just use the battery, the bulb, and the wire. And then as we observed what happened, we tried things. Students found different ways to organize and arrange the materials so that they would work. Then they also were introduced to some of those additional materials. Briefly, I just want to talk about a question I am seeing up on the chat room is about language, because there are so many teachers that have ELL students, and thinking about the language, because words can be really confusing. And obviously some of the language that we're using here tonight as adults and adult learners, we wouldn't necessarily use with kids. The idea of claims and evidence is a tough one sometimes, but I think that if we can use simpler words to describe exactly what it is that's happening. The other thing is having it happening across all subject areas. I know in our state we use claims and evidence in writing, in math, social studies, science, every single subject area, so students begin to really feel comfortable with those words. You know, there's also the idea of pictures and using real objects and putting up word walls as well.
Okay, so this is where I was confused a few minutes ago, but now you can see what happened first, which was the anchoring event, and then the investigation, which was in the second video. So again, this storyline is building, it's coherent, it makes sense. Now we get a little bit further. Again, there's a few more questions here for students to think about what's happening. As you can see with that little accordion fan, that lots of things have happened before students ever get, again, to their models to think about what they will change and what revisions they will make. One of the things that's really important that you understand is that this storyline, this planning, everything we've kind of done tonight is really two-dimensional, whereas all of these things are happening all the time. It's messy, it's iterative, it goes back and forth. Sometimes I might be doing an explore and constructing an explanation within 45 minutes. Other times it might be just arguing with evidence, and that took 2 days. So you have to understand that it happens in different places and in different slides. So I think we're running short of time, so what I'm going to ask is that you type your questions in the chat, and if we have time, we'll come back to them later, because I want you to get through the rest of these pieces, which I think are important. And Mary, I'm going to hand it to you on that note.
Awesome. Thanks, Kathy. That was amazing to be able to see Tracy in the classroom, really working with kids and really thinking about these ideas around how do we have students explore a phenomenon and make sense of it. So create explanations, make claims. And that all brings us to this idea that we're moving beyond activities. We're really trying to get students engaged in exploring phenomenon and not just in doing activities, collecting data, and drawing pictures. This really is what Tracy showed us, was a very carefully thought out storyline, and it's very different from the idea of having a binder of activities that we've really been working from in the past. So there's all this stuff that we're going to need to know in order to move towards NGSS. We're going to have to really dive into those disciplinary core ideas, the cross-cutting concepts, the practices. It's amazing the amount of stuff, and it's a lot. So what we need is to really think about what are the resources that we can use. So I've mentioned several times in the chat window, suggesting to you that you go back to the framework and to the NGSS documents, because they provide you a lot of information with regard to how to plan and what's the expectation for student learning. Kathy also has created beautiful resources for you. So I'm going to pass it back to Kathy so she can really start to show you some of those resources.
And before I get to the resources, this slide you've seen before. I'm not going to spend any time on it. But again, other than to say, we really want to give our students meaningful experiences, develop that community of practice with you. We want these webinars to be valuable, and we hope that they are. And so now I'm going to move to the next slide and get to those resources. Here's our action item. Do we have time, Christina, to deal with our action item?
I think we are running a little bit short on time. We just have a few more minutes, and then I think we do want to focus on the question and answers. So if there's any way we can push on, okay. Sorry about that.
Okay, I will push on through this one. So, and I'm going to be brief here in the resources. The biggest one of the biggest ones I use all the time is the Learning Center. I'm not going to spend a lot of time these days on NGSS at the Hub, NSTA at the Hub, but I'm going to let Ted talk about that if he decides to. I have put some pictures of some of the resources that we used, as well as the links where to get them. They're not only on this slide, but they're also in the collection that I've created. I'm going to continue adding to this collection because, just for example, today I got from a librarian resource list of text sets that could go with this collection that I didn't have before that. So now I'm moving on one more time. There you go, Ted.
Thanks very much. I'll just take a couple minutes here to really sort of refer to folks. You all should be aware that you can find the standards themselves, nextgenscience.org, or also your one-stop shop for all things NGSS is really the NGSS at NSTA Hub. We've got set up there. We've just put up some new resources and organized some things differently there, so go and check that out even if you've seen it before. We have listservs for all these discussions to go on beyond today's chat. We've been having some great things going in the chat windows. So there's a discussion forum on NGSS in the Learning Center, and then also we have a member-only listserv on NGSS as well. So for those of you NST members could get involved in that. We're going to be back here for the final grade of our elementary seminar this year, coming in February 18th. Same bat time, same bat channel. I want to point out for you all, I hope to see a bunch of you folks here again tomorrow night, where we've got another web seminar focusing on NGSS and looking at NARS, the National Association of Research and Science Teaching, their supportive implementation and perspectives on curriculum that I think you might find interesting, with some 3 great speakers there. We've got a number of archives of just about on any topic you can imagine with the web seminars. Check that out. Also, a variety of journal articles. All of those things can be accessed via the hub. We've got books and books galore about NGSS. You can check those out. The NGSS app, places to get that as well. And conferences coming up in Chicago and then a STEM Forum in Minneapolis. In Chicago, I want to point out we're going to have an NGSS Share-a-thon, and Carla, Mary, and Kathy have all agreed to be one of the pieces in our Share-a-thon for those of you who are interested in learning some more. We'll also have a full day of programs devoted to NGSS, and there are over, I think I checked, 300 different sessions in Chicago devoted to NGSS.
Ted, one more minute before you move.
Next fall,
yes. Ted, 1 minute before you move from Chicago. I just wanted to say that Tracy is joining me, and we will be having a session that people will actually be able to do some of the things that we did. So we will be in Chicago if you're there.
And someone just pointed out for me, and I thought I had fixed this slide. It had come up, but I think in organizing today I pulled from the wrong slideshow. The dates listed here for Chicago are not the correct dates. I will post those for you in the window in just a minute when I verify them. Or Christina, I don't know if you can pull those up quickly, but we'll get that out to you. But coming down the fall, here are some other conferences: Reno, Philadelphia, Kansas City next fall. And with that, I'm going to pass things to Christina to get you all set up for our for filling out our survey. And after the survey, we'll come back here and answer you some of your questions.
Okay, huge thanks, guys. And if we could just take two seconds to do a round of applause for Ted, Mary, Kathy, and Tracy for getting through all this information today. It was a huge amount, and I think the recording is going to be a great resource for everybody. So huge thanks to all of you for getting through it so seamlessly. And also, I'm just pushing ahead to also thank the Carnegie Corporation for sponsoring tonight's web seminar, as well as the entire team at NSTA. And you've got Ted here, and you've got Jeff here as well from the team. So really great to have these web seminars and all these great resources and presenters. So with that, I'd like to mention that you can find resources related to today's presentation by going to the web seminar collection in the NSTA Learning Center. That's going to include the archive of the web seminar and the presentation slides. So the collection may also include journal articles and lesson plans, as well as other interactive content modules. These are called science objects and SciPacks, and as well as other helpful links to websites and multimedia. So go ahead and have a look at that at the collection. We'll give you the link to the collection again shortly. And of course, for those of you joining us live, you will be receiving an email within the next couple of days with a link to access the archive as well as the collection. And just looking ahead shortly, we do have a web seminar tomorrow, as Ted mentioned, on NGSS again, and that's a research perspective. So do check that out if you can, as well as web seminars going into February. So you've got the link there at the bottom of the page there. You've got learningcenter.nsta.org/web seminar, and that's going to give you the full list of upcoming seminars. So with that, we'd like to thank you all for coming and look forward to seeing you again at another web seminar. Thanks, everyone.